The wind knifes across the open deck, carrying the sharp, metallic taste of ice and coal smoke. Below, inside the ship's long corridors, the air is warmer, but it is thick with confusion, with footsteps, with doors opening and slamming shut. Somewhere under the boat deck, a cluster of third-class families presses into a narrow passageway. The ship tilts. A lamp swings once, twice, then steadies, as if the vessel itself is trying to pretend nothing is wrong. But the sound betrays the lie, a distant, continuous roar, steam venting like an angry beast, drowning out shouted orders above. Up top, lifeboats creak as they swing outward into blackness. Down here, people hear the word boats passed mouth to mouth in half a dozen languages, then swallowed by the ship's maze. A mother grips her child's wrist until her knuckles bleach white. A man pounds a door and gets no answer. And still, the water keeps coming. Who is finding the way out and who is losing it in the corridors? Why do lifeboats leave the ship with empty seats while hundreds remain trapped inside? And when the final boats are gone, what happens to the people still below decks? What happens next begins days earlier, not with panic, but with confidence built from steel, wealth, and a world that believes it is entering a safer century. On Wednesday, April 10, 1912, RMS Titanic departs Southampton on her maiden voyage. She is enormous, built by Harland and Wolff, 882.6 feet long, a floating city of electric light and polished wood. In the eyes of passengers, she is not merely a ship. She is an argument, a statement that modern engineering has mastered the Atlantic. Source aboard are more than 2,000 souls, first-class magnates and socialites, second-class professionals and families, and third-class emigrants chasing a new beginning. The ship is certified to carry far more. But tonight, on this crossing, about 2,223 people are on board, passengers and crew combined. Source, and there are the lifeboats, 20 in all. 14 lifeboats meant to carry 65 each. 2 smaller emergency boats and 4 collapsible craft with canvas sides. The total capacity is about 1,176, barely half the people aboard. Yet the ship's David's 16 sets of modern, double-acting equipment could have handled far more boats. The tragedy is not that the technology is missing. It is that the will to require it is missing. Source: on paper, Titanic is legal. On the ocean, legality is not the same as survival. In the background, an even quieter danger lurks: preparation. The Senate inquiry later finds that many crewmen joined only hours before sailing, and that drill was minimal: only 2 lifeboats lowered and raised again in Southampton, no full rehearsal, no practiced rhythm. In a disaster measured in minutes, muscle memory matters. Source: among the passengers is 17-year-old Jack Thayer, young, observant, restless with the excitement of travel. Decades later, he will write that the ship felt like certainty itself, bright, steady, modern. He remembers the night air turning colder on Sunday, April 14th. He remembers the sea like glass and the stars like cut diamonds, the kind of calm that hides danger. Source: in first class, Dr. Washington Dodge moves through the calm with the trust of a professional man. When the jolt comes, he is told twice that there is no danger. Like many, he believes what authority tells him until orders suddenly come: put on life preservers. Source: above them all are the officers, men trained in discipline, yet facing a scenario few have ever truly rehearsed. As the ship takes damage, the evacuation will split by side. First Officer Murdoch working the starboard boats. Second Officer Lytler working the port. Their choices: how strictly to interpret, women and children. How many to load, how fast to lower will shape who lives and who dies. Source: but the story we are telling is not only on the boat deck, it is also in the stairwells and passageways. In the separation between classes. In the geography of a ship built for order, suddenly forced into chaos. Because third class is not on the boat deck. Third class is below, far below, down corridors that twist through gates and barriers meant for peacetime rules. Some of those gates exist to comply with American immigration laws designed to keep steerage passengers separate for health inspection procedures. They are not created for a disaster, but in a disaster they become something else entirely. Source: the British inquiry later notes, Allegations that third-class passengers were maliciously locked below are false. Yet evidence suggests that, at first, gates and stewards waiting for instructions slowed movement, and by the time routes opened, many lifeboats were already gone. No malice is required for catastrophe, confusion is enough. Source: and on Titanic, confusion spreads faster than water. By midnight, the ship is still bright with electric light, steam venting, and a deafening roar. People hesitate. Some do not believe the ship can sink. Others do not know where to go. On the port side, lifeboats begin to lower, but often underfilled. On the lower decks, families search for an upward path that feels impossibly far away. The point of no return arrives quietly, not in a scream, not in a crash, just in the growing angle of the deck beneath their feet. The ship commits to the sea, and the people commit to their choices, whether they understand them or not. Then the lifeboats begin to leave. Chapter 1. Hope and Optimism. It is only precaution. At first, the evacuation has the strange atmosphere of a drill. On deck, officers speak in firm tones, stewards usher passengers forward. The ship's lights remain steady. In Dr. Washington Dodge's account, the officers loading the boats appear cool and masterful, enforcing the command to care for women and children first. When Boat 13 is lowered to a deck for loading, he watches women step in. Then, suddenly, there are no more women within hearing to respond to the call. Men begin climbing in. Someone shoves Dodge forward. Get in. Doctor, and in moments the boat is filled. Source: this detail matters. It reveals a truth that will define the night. Sometimes the boats are not leaving half empty because officers refuse people. Sometimes they are leaving half empty because the crowd is not yet fully there, not yet convinced, not yet organized, but the optimism is brittle. Every few minutes, the ship's angle becomes more noticeable. The cold becomes sharper. The roar of venting steam makes conversation difficult, forcing men to gesture more than speak. Pause. Below decks, the optimism is not even an option. There, people do not see lifeboats swinging out. They see corridors, doors, stairways. They smell coal dust, damp wool, and the sour fear that rises when crowds press into tight spaces. And already the map of the ship is choosing winners. Micro cliffhanger: the first boats go down, but the system guiding who reaches them is beginning to fail. Chapter 2. First signs of trouble: delays, underfilled boats, and the problem of belief on the port side. Second Officer Charles Lytler is trying to do the right thing, and in doing so, he makes decisions that historians will debate for more than a century. He believes it is unsafe to lower boats filled to capacity while they hang high above the sea, suspended only at bow and stern. He testifies that it does not seem seamanlike to load a boat chock full of people when it is suspended at each end. Better to get the boat safely into the water than to risk losing everyone in it before it ever reaches the sea. Source: so boats leave with 25, 30, 40, while more than 60 might have fit? Then comes a practical error that costs time. But the windows are closed. The plan collapses into confusion. He sends people back up, instructs men to find the handles to lower the windows, and leaves the boat hanging delayed while other boats proceed. Source: meanwhile, on starboard, Murdoch's side is already launching boats. A half hour in a sinking is not a half hour on a clock. It is an entire lifeboat sequence. Micro cliffhanger: above decks, the evacuation is losing precious time. Below decks, the crowd is only now beginning to understand that the ship is truly dying. Chapter 3. Situation worsens. The sea, the machinery, the narrowing window of escape in Dodge's account. One danger nearly kills an entire lifeboat before it reaches the ocean. The condenser pump discharge, a violent stream of water thrown out from the ship's side. As Boat 13 is lowered, it drifts toward that torrent. Above them, Boat 15 is descending too, swinging dangerously overhead. Shouts rise, lowering is arrested. Men in Boat 13 push the bow away with an oar, then drop into the sea and are swept clear by the force of the water. Source: it is not just panic that threatens them. It is the ship itself, its systems still working, still pumping, still venting steam, still fighting physics. And the ship's systems are still alive because men below decks keep them alive. In Jack Thayer's account, the lights remain strong deep into the final hour. and he credits the engineering crews with making it possible. They keep power for wireless calls and electric illumination so passengers are not plunged into darkness and stampede. That light will later become one of the night's most haunting images, glowing rectangles underwater as flooding climbs the stairways. Source: but light does not save time. The boat sinks lower. The walkable deck space shrinks. The lifeboat stations become more crowded. Those still below must now climb not only stairs but other people's urgency. Micro cliffhanger: the ship is still bright, yet the pathways to salvation are beginning to choke. Chapter 4. Internal conflicts. Authority, fear, and the sound of gunfire order on a sinking ship is not maintained by calm words alone. As crowds gather and the reality becomes undeniable, officers begin to fear a rush on the boat's one surge. That could swamp a lifeboat at the davits or crush women and children at the rail. Guns exist aboard Titanic not as decoration, but as tools against mutiny or uncontrollable disorder. Lytler later writes that Titanic was the only time at sea he ever saw firearms handed out to officers, and he describes retrieving revolvers from the first officer's cabin as the evacuation intensifies. Source: and at least one officer uses his weapon openly. At the U.S. Senate inquiry, 5th Officer Harold Lowe admits he fired shots while being lowered in Lifeboat No. 14. He describes seeing men along the rails glaring like wild beasts ready to spring, and says he fired along the ship's side in a narrow space between lifeboat and hull to deter anyone from jumping in and adding weight that might break the falls. He insists he had no intention of hurting anyone, and that he did not hit anyone. Source: in the abstract, it is a warning. In the moment, it is a sound that changes everything. A gunshot on a ship is not merely noise. It is a declaration. The rules will be enforced by force if necessary. Below decks, that sound muffled through steel would feel like the ship turning against its own people. Micro cliffhanger: the lifeboat decks are no longer a controlled departure point. They are a contested border. Chapter 5. Crisis point: the women and children. Order becomes a blade. The famous phrase, "women and children first," is both mercy and sentence. At the British inquiry, Quartermaster Robert Hickens testifies he heard Captain Smith say, "women and children first," and the officer repeated it. Hickens is assigned to Lifeboat No. 6 under Lytler. He later describes how passengers were hesitant to get and some would rather stay aboard of the ship. The boat leaves with far fewer than its full capacity. Source: above decks, officers interpret the order differently. On the port side, Lytler tends toward women and children only, a strictness that survivors and historians still debate. Source: and this is where the title of our story, Trapped Below Decks, takes its cruelest shape. Because if you are a third-class mother with children, the rule is theoretically on your side if you can reach the boats. But if you are trapped in corridors, delayed by gates, lost in the ship's labyrinth, or unable to understand shouted instructions in English, then the rule becomes meaningless. The BBC's review of Titanic myths notes that while malicious locking is unsupported, the structure of the ship and early delays at gates could block steerage. Movement, especially before instructions came, meaning many third-class passengers reached the boat deck late, after boats had already launched. Source: so the ship's social hierarchy becomes geography, not cruelty perhaps, but consequence. Micro cliffhanger: the lifeboats are leaving. The corridors below are still full. Chapter 6. Desperate decisions and moral dilemmas. The last boats. And the ones who will not fit as the final hour tightens, choices become brutal. Jack Thayer describes the moment after most boats have gone. Crowds compress toward the stern as water advances. The roar of exhaust steam stops suddenly, leaving an eerie quiet in which other sounds become terrifyingly clear: rushing feet, sobbing voices, the ship's inner groans. He watches the ship's final behavior, then finds himself in the water, then by chance on the overturned collapsible boat with dozens clinging to its slick bottom. Source: he describes the cries after the ship disappears, 1,500 voices becoming one long wailing chant, then fading, one by one, as cold overwhelms them. He records the moral wound that haunts every Titanic retelling. Boats nearby did not return, afraid of being swamped. He calls it the most heart-rending part of the tragedy. Source. And yet the fear is not irrational. A lifeboat can be swamped easily by desperate swimmers. A single mistake can kill everyone inside it. This is moral complexity with no clean answers. Return and risk all, or stay away and listen to the dying. Meanwhile, the official record confirms how thin the margin was from the start. The Senate report lays out the lifeboat capacity 1,176 total, and the lack of full drill and posted boat stations early in the voyage. In other words, even if everything had gone perfectly, there were not enough seats. And everything did not go perfectly. Source. Micro cliffhanger, the final boats are not simply last chances. They are collapsing chances, improvised, half-launched, and contested by the sea itself. What happens next seals the fate of everyone still inside. The ship's bow has gone into the Atlantic now, dragging the long body downward. Water creeps up the boat deck like a living thing, stealing space, stealing time. The lights still burn and impossible, brightness against the night, because men below continue to feed the dynamos with steam and discipline. Source. Then the structure begins to speak. Thayer describes muffled thuds, dead, internal blows, followed by a forward lurch, a rumbling roar, and the sensation of enormous machinery tearing itself free. He watches funnels fall. He is pulled down, spun in the freezing water, and then his hand touches something firm and rounded, the cork fender of an overturned collapsible lifeboat. He hauls himself up onto the slick underside with others, packed close, unable to move without risking the entire raft tipping. Source? For those trapped below decks, there is no raft. No starlit horizon, no oar scraping at a lifeboat's edge. There is only rising water and narrowing corridors. On deck, in the final minutes, lifeboats that remain are improvised collapsibles freed too late. Boats washed off as the sea reaches the bridge. In the confusion, some float away half-submerged or upside down, becoming not lifeboats but last platforms for the living. And then Titanic goes under. Thayer writes of a brief silence almost holy in its emptiness before the cries begin. Not a few voices, hundreds, then 1,000. A sound like nature itself mourning. He estimates that within 20 or 30 minutes, the cries diminish as cold claims those in the water. Pause. The sea does not need waves to kill. It only needs temperature. Source. By morning, the lifeboats become evidence-floating islands of survivors. Some half-empty, some crowded, some with the injured and the dead. The Senate report's cold arithmetic will later list totals. About 706 saved, about 1,517 lost. Third-class suffers worst only. About 174 third-class passengers survive out of roughly 710. Source. As the BBC account summarizes class-shaped access, not necessarily through intentional cruelty, but through the ship's layout, the distance to the boat deck and early delays before gates were opened when many lifeboats had already gone, the result is deadly regardless of intent. Source. Some questions remain, as they always have. Historians debate specific details. How fully certain boats could have been loaded safely? How many warning shots were fired beyond those admitted? What exactly was seen in the final moments? Even official testimony contradicts itself in places, memory distorted by darkness, by shock, by survival. But the broad truth does not change. The tragedy is not only the iceberg. It is also the human system that followed it. Hesitation, uneven information, unequal pathways, and lifeboats leaving before the ship's lowest passengers could even find the stairs. In the aftermath, survivors carry the night into the rest of their lives in fragments. The scream of steam, the scrape of ropes, the sudden quiet when the engines stop. Jack Thayer survives on an overturned collapsible, later writing that the world awoke on April 15, 1912, shaken from an old certainty into a new century of vulnerability. Source. The official record would tally the failure in numbers and procedure. Too few boats for the people aboard, too little drilling, confusion in boat stations, and life-saving capacity that law allowed, but the ocean refused to forgive. Source. And the myths of locked gates, of perfect heroism, of simple villains would grow in the decades that followed. Yet even careful historical review finds something more chilling than myth, that no malice is required for disaster. Only delay. Only uncertainty, only doors that remain closed a little too long. Source: the wind still howls across that vanished deck in the imagination, cold, dark, relentless. Lifeboats still creak into the black. Below, in the corridors, footsteps still run. And the water still comes. If you found this story compelling, there are many more forgotten tales of survival and tragedy waiting to be told.